What is the urge to power? Well, there's a lot of different reasons that this urge pops up or becomes manifest. There's some basic ones that we can cover first, however. Let's say you lived as, a child growing up in a household environment where you felt very small and vulnerable and weak. Let's say your parents were abusive, your mother and father didn't get along. You couldn't understand exactly how you could help solve their personality issues with one another, and you didn't quite know how to stop the physical abuse upon yourself. And you spent many years as a child feeling that lack of power and the lack of power of knowledge, of understanding of why this is happening. Or we can go to seeing growing up and fearing that you're going to be bombed. Whether it's a child who grew up during, the Cold War in the United States or in Russia or in China, who really feared the other side dropping bombs because you had to go through these drills at school, what to do when a bomb drops, or how do you react when those sirens go off. That fear is created. The threat is there, but that fear is created. And you want to be able to control the bombs that are being dropped or have power over forces that might try to destroy you and your family. Or we can go a little bit more macro. Let's say that you're a KGB agent and your union, your country and its allies, their political structure is dying, fading away. And your rival, materialists, people who focus on the idea that if you work hard enough and get enough for yourself, you can be your own savior. And everybody can be their own saviors if they work hard enough. Whereas you, being that agent of your union of nations, have been taught and have seen that it's better if human beings work together without greed, without selfish motive. Let's say that you see your group of nations fall and decline, their political structure collapses. And then the force that allied against you, you see it growing in power. You see it starting to rule the world. And you see how those nations working together under a different flag, under a different kind of group or organization, how their influence stretches so wide that it's actually starting to hit the border of your own nation. It's getting very close, and that's very uncomfortable, because everything that you've always hated, been taught to hate, and have seen the greed of, how it can destroy the unity of man, it's getting closer and closer to your border as more nations join it. I'm speaking, of course, of Vladimir Putin and his view of NATO. So, as it gets closer, another nation, Ukraine, wants to join NATO, wants to join that group of nations that you have both feared and hated for decades of your life. And you've even worked on the opposite side of. But your side kind of lost, kind of faded away a bit. And you see them strong, and they're coming closer to your border. Because the nation, Ukraine, that decided, it's better to ally with NATO than to be under the thumb of Russia. As Putin, you tried to install various puppet leaders in Ukraine that was kind of puppets of Russia. The other puppet nations, not falling in line anymore. There's a couple that still remain. But Ukraine, despite you making an agreement with them, a treaty, and having talks with them, they still want to join in that unified military pact. That if you attack one, you attack all of them. So Putin says, okay, I'm going to try to do a fast strike. Go quick, go heavy, and try to take back Ukraine and install a government that'll leave me a little bit of a buffer between the enemy and my nation. Doesn't go as planned. Things start to go wrong. You start to care even less than you originally did about civilian losses, infrastructure, and the suffering of the people in Ukraine, because they start to feel like they're all the enemy. Sure, we made up that thing about being a country with a Nazi regime despite having a Jewish leader, which didn't make a whole lot of sense, but it didn't have to, because it was easy to come up with. All you needed was the excuse. It didn't have to make sense. It didn't have to make sense that a nation led by a Jewish man was infiltrated by Nazis, even though Nazis viewed the Slavs as a subhuman race. Because after all, there's a battalion that still holds the same military title that they had when they fought with Germany against Russia, the Soviet Union. Just have to have all the reasons lined up. Just have to have all the explanations there. They don't have to make a lot of sense. They just have to be there. Because we gotta have that buffer no matter what. Things keep on going wrong. People in your own country start to question why things are taking so long. And is Ukraine all Nazis if there's this much resistance? And why are our tactics doing so badly? Surely our tactics could have been done better. Surely we've learned from wars between the founding of the Soviet Union and now. And the cracks in the military start to show themselves, start to be apparent. Basic things like infantry screening of tanks. Not enough infantry. Didn't think you had to deploy a bunch of infantry with the tanks because it was just only going to last a few days before power was secured in Kyiv, the capital of Ukraine. And surely it wouldn't take that long. Your troops might as well pack their parade uniforms and only pack rations for a few days, because it's not going to take that long. When it starts taking a long time, it starts taking longer and longer. More questions from the Russian public. Where are all the communications? Where are they? So you decide to eventually admit, yeah, we lost about 40,000 of our soldiers there. But don't worry, we'll get it underhand. And Putin behind it all, he's getting as worried as a man like him can get, which is not extremely worried, pretty collected. And him starts to decide, okay, so I'm going to need more men. Surely if we just throw more men at this, the loss of technology, tanks, which a lot of them have the flaw of having the ammunition line the inside of the turret, so when an anti-tank projectile, either from an in-law or a javelin, goes right at the turret, either above it, a lot of time above it, designed to shoot down, or into it, turret just pops off very easily. Sure, if we just keep on sending more people in, then the situation will be resolved. We've lost a lot of technology, we've lost a lot of pilots, a lot of airplanes, and that ticking time bomb of Western aid from the nations that you hate under NATO, that ticking time bomb is getting closer and closer to being an absolute flood of given technology, funds, and everything else that you need for war to Ukraine. As your own resources go down, their resources go up more and more and more. And surely people, men, throwing them into the fight, surely that will change things. There's another history lesson that I think a lot of Russian pundits, because I do watch with subtitles on, a lot of Russian state TV, and a lot of what the officials are saying, a lot of what just the commentators are saying. What they should start to remember about the lessons of the revolution in Russia. So the imperial family there, during World War One, they kept on sending a lot of Russian men. A lot of them that eventually, as the war wore on, there wasn't a rifle for everybody. There wasn't any desire to provide them with medical care. There was a lack of technology and care for creature comforts or necessary comforts and supplies like food, blankets, winterized gear, rifles, and a lack of a desire to try to raise morale or justify. Where Putin went wrong is that he thinks that the propaganda he's putting out, which he's putting out quite a bit, that it just had to be convincing enough. And it was for a long time. But there's only so much padding poorly orchestrated excuses can provide from the reality of a situation. And at this point, he can't really back it down. Just like the Russian Empire before it fell to the Red Revolution. Didn't really feel like there was a way to back down. Just throw more men in. There's one revolt, crush it. There's one revolt among the soldiers. There's a revolt in St. Petersburg. There's revolts among the Navy. Just squish it. Squish that, squish that, squish that. As long as most people fall in line, then everything's going to turn out okay. Just need more. We just need to push more, harder and harder. And ironically, despite having worked with the KGB and being a KGB agent and being assigned as a leader after Gorbachev, and I don't even know how many years Putin has been in charge to this day. He's gone from president to prime minister and back and forth, and then he had a puppet in Russia, but he's been in charge for quite a while. I feel like the closer that he's gotten to hate, absolute hate of NATO, his enemy, the more he forgets about history and how a whole lot of disgruntled people, a whole lot of disgruntled soldiers might just cause a revolution against the vision that you believe is the only one that can save your nation. That's where a lot of leaders get jaded. They start to think that their vision is the only one that can save a nation and that everyone else will believe in it as well, or enough will. And that since your vision is the best, because you have the position, it's your divine right. Your vision is the best. You're there. You're in charge. That everybody is willing to make the sacrifices on an individual level that you are willing to make on a national level. The destructions of as many individuals as it takes to create a buffer that would not matter. And that's another thing that you start to forget as you become a more jaded ruler, is that if you really thought about it, Ukraine, even with its size, it's about the size of Texas. It's, with NATO's manpower, air force, and armor capabilities, it's not a buffer worth downgrading your military generations by wasting material and personnel. That buffer doesn't matter as much as it used to. Jets and planes, they fly fast, they fly longer, and they have satellite imagery. Land doesn't mean what it used to. And the old imperial tactics don't work. like they used to. This isn't attrition anymore in the same way. Bodies don't matter as much as technology and capability. So, his urge to power will cause him to throw more and more men at this problem, thinking that it's necessary. Though the political aims of the war have already been defeated. As soon as nations started to say, we feel safer joining NATO than being on your side, the political aims of the war were done, over. It was lost. Now it's just trying to hold on to some dirt, old-fashioned imperialism. Imperialism by an ex-KGB agent, which is the most ironic thing that I can possibly think of. With the political aims, Finland that already opens up a border. Finland's trying to join NATO. They haven't gone through the whole process, but they're in the process of joining. Has already opened up a larger front than had existed previously on Russia's border for NATO to basically go into. And the political aims of invading Ukraine and taking it over and installing a puppet regime were defeated as soon as other nations wanted to join NATO that were right on Russia's border. But he doesn't have a way to back down. And his vision becomes more crystalline, and reality becomes more faded. That is the urge to power, taken to its extreme. It can start as something that makes sense. It can start small. But then it becomes so much bigger than you were prepared for. It becomes a picture that you've painted that's in front of your eyes, as there's a growing crowd behind that picture of your own people, ready, waiting, and more willing to tear that picture down that's clouding your eyes. And only then does a despot see his end. At any rate, I hope this was interesting. This has been a bit of a rant. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, zoom down in the comment section on YouTube. I would love to hear them. At any rate, thank you very much for watching, and hope all of you have a wonderful day.